Welcome to the Resistance, my siblings. Let me tell you all about how to use our units, how to turn the weak civilians into victorious insurgents who throw off the yoke of oppression. This is the Genestealer Cult. Collecting Genestealer Cult is a big commitment. Remember that whenever you collect an army, building and painting will be 80% of your time with the army. The last bit is playing on the table. For Genestealer Cult hordes, it's more like 90% to 10%, so a commitment is expected to be a follower of the Patriarch. Once you have your units, and yes, I am hand-waving that 90% away, you can paint or convert while listening to me. This is a look at the units, and this video will cover every single unit of the Genestealer Cult. If you have been out of Warhammer 40,000 for a while and heard about what the Genestealer Cult can do at the start of the edition, that was the index. The codex is quite different, so I will also cover changes from the index to the codex. Many opponents may not have played against the Genestealer Cult since the index, and will still explain or complain about the demo charges blowing apart tanks easily, and the near infinite number of mortal wounds Jackal Bikers can cause, and infiltrating Aberrants barreling down the field. Only one of those is still a scary threat. This is no mere list of changes. Any Warhammer YouTuber with access to the codex could do that. This is a detailed look into all of the units, how to use them, and how to get the best of them in their best detachment. I want to cover every unit to find a use for even the worst performing unit so that whatever your collection, you can operate on the table. You will play how you want to play and discover more tactics the more you play. Extra tactics are appreciated in the comments. For now, you can comment with your favourite Genestealer Cult unit below or in the chat if you are here for the live premiere. Click the subscribe button to keep up with Genestealer Cult changes, because after the codex have come balance patches that completely change how Cult Ambush works. You no longer roll a die for each destroyed unit. At the start of the game, you have a number of resurgence points based on the size of the game. As your units are destroyed, a copy of that unit can be placed in Cult Ambush for the cost in resurgence points on this table. The table and the numbers on it can change. Subscribe to keep up with the latest in table and tabletop information. I'm too proud of that line. Subscribing makes you part of this Genestealer Cult community. Cult Ambush is like Strategic Reserves. Almost exactly like Strategic Reserves, except you can't rapid ingress to get out of it. You can deep strike on your turn, Strategic Reserves and Deep Strike are compatible, or you can arrive from the board edge in the case of Jackal Bikers as per Strategic Reserves, or if you want to appear in your opponent's turn, then you use the Cult Ambush markers in the Cult Ambush rule. The Cult Ambush markers operate like Space Marine Terminator teleporters, a place you, sort of, rapid ingress to for free. That is an overview of Cult Ambush at time of recording, but this video is about the units. And it should stand as a useful community tool. If you are interested in using any Genestealer Cult unit, you can come to this video, go to the unit, and see how you can use it on the tabletop in Warhammer 40,000. And that is why you like the video. Then you can see it in your liked playlist and come back to it, and the more you watch, the more other people will see this video and also learn. When the Genestealer Cult Codex came out, despite the general gloom around it, and the idea, let's say the meme, that there are two rules teams. One does the good rules, one does the bad rules, and while the sisters got the good team on Codex launch, we Genestealer Cult players got the bad one. But I was still excited to play with those rules, and I remain very excited to play the Genestealer Cult. Through thick or thin, the resistance continues. And many issues with the Codex have been resolved, so perhaps Team 1 got around to it, or Games Workshop hired more rules writers. More rules writers would be nice, but that would cost money, and perhaps the executives at Games Workshop prefer to spend that money on this, so that they can do lines of it off the thighs of elven cosplayers. Hypothetically. If you hate the Codex, I see no reason why outside of most tournaments in a friend group, you can't keep using the index rules. That will allow you to keep 25% Brood Brothers allies, otherwise you can only use the Brood Brothers Auxiliary Detachment, which allows you to have up to half your army as Brood Brothers units from the Imperial Guard. Not every faction has a codex, like the Deep Striking Chaos Demons. It's your game. If you and your opponent want to have fun continuing to play the Index, then play the Index. A company in Nottingham runs a gaming company, maybe more accurate to say a model company. They do not also run the fun police or the rules police. And Games Workshop should really worry about the police if well-respecting people in the Genestealer Cult community potentially uncovered an elf-based drug ring. Allegedly. As we cover each unit, we'll also look at the detachment they work best in. This is not to say that they only work in one detachment, or that you are foolish to take them in any other detachment, but it gives you an idea of their best power level. And if you want to focus on a detachment and go for the units following that, I have a separate video on clever tactics with the Genestealer Cult that has each unit grouped with its best detachment. What I'm going to start with today is the battle line units, the core of any detachment. The first battle line unit, at least alphabetically, are the Acolytes. But since the Index, one Acolyte unit has become two Acolyte units. One of the hybrids with autopistols and mining tools, the other has hand flamers and demo charges. So this one box now builds 3 different kinds of units. I can just imagine Games Workshop hovering over the shoulder of new players and saying, "I hope you don't build it wrong. Then you would have to buy another box. Wouldn't that be a shame?" The Acolytes with autopistols I also sometimes call combat acolytes or mining tool acolytes. You may remember me talking about the box locking issue, where units can only have the weapons that come in their box. Normally that is a bad limit, but with the combat acolytes it's been more of a blessing. They can have all 3 of the mining tools that come in the box per unit of 5. That's the saw, the drill, the cutter. They don't each have special rules. There's nothing uniquely different between the saw or the drill, which at least makes it easier to kit bash your own versions. The other 2 models in the unit of 5 will be one leader with leader weapons and a model with a cult icon. If you had a unit of 10, that is 6 mining tools, a leader, an icon, and 2 guys with claws and pistols. The mining tools are damage 3, unlike some other combat weapons that I'm going to mention a bit later on for other units. They're only strength 5, but with anti-vehicle 4+. So they hurt vehicles more than demo charges, but if it's an enemy that has a lot of monsters, not so good. Oh, I'm glad they're on our side, and always will be. If the Tyranids come a-feasting and they have monsters, we can't really hurt them. Lore thematic, or a bit of a problem with the main rules separating monsters and vehicles? It could be that one. And I don't see why an edition without armor values we can't have the same keyword for monsters and vehicles. The Acolytes with mining tools have a different unit ability to their Index and also different to their demo charge handflamer brothers and sisters. They have the unit ability that was previously the Neophytes in the Index. They can sit on objectives and try and generate command points. This is a little bit at odds with them. I want them rushing towards the enemy in a truck or coming up from below, not really holding objectives after they've cleared them. Another rule with this to note, all objectives are contested until the end of the first phase. Any abilities that trigger before the end of the command phase on objectives won't work for the first player's first turn. So our Acolytes can't try and generate a command point in the first turn if you go first, because you don't control that objective yet. Trying to generate a command point happens at the start of the command phase. But in the Outlander Claw detachment, adding sticky to an objective is at the end of the command phase, and if 2 things happen at the same time, the active player chooses the order they are resolved in. So it still works, but the Acolytes won't be able to get a command point on your home objective if you go first. The Acolytes with mining tools are a little bit cheaper than their hand flamer and demo charge counterparts, so every detachment, except maybe Brood Brothers, will want this unit in some form or another. 5 of them can hold a home objective. Neophytes may do the job better. 10 Acolytes can cause damage, because a unit of 10 charging from reserves after rapid ingress, or jumping out of a truck and charging, that's a lot of damage 3 attacks if they can get through, and that will depend on the character leading them. Lethal hits with a Biophagus. Always fight first with a Locus, even if you get charged. +1 to hit with a Primus, or by using one of the enhancements that gives the unit +1 to hit if you attach it to a character, or stratagems in the Acolyte Focus Xenocreed detachment that give you an extra weapon skill and an extra attack. And in the Final Day detachment, if you're coordinating with the Tyranids, +1 to hit. Mining weapons hitting on a 2+ is nasty. Or you could do the Biosanctuary Brute Surge. With the Biophagus, you get +1 to charge and an extra attack if you charge. Charging can be difficult. Hiding behind a wall makes it hard to get an angle to shoot them, and a Locus giving the unit fight first makes it a difficult choice for your opponent to charge them. But you can charge through the walls of a ruin because you are infantry. Don't forget that your cult icon lets you regenerate models. The other kind of Acolyte are the shooting Acolytes with hand flamers and demo charges. Sometimes called shooting Acolytes, sometimes called Acolytes with hand flamers, which is their official name, sometimes called Acolytes with demo charges. It's still 2 demo charges per 5 because that is what is in the box. The demo charge's power is toned down quite substantially from the index. We are still damage 2, but they are D6 shots and strength 9 compared to their previous version on screen, which is D6 plus 3 attacks at strength 12. I am okay with this change. And I know it will not be popular to say so, but so many Genestealer Cult players relied on demo charges to do everything for them. Having a crutch made out of explosives is not that sensible. So new Neophyte's first army in 10th edition was as many demo charge models as they had, and they didn't try other tactics. Because demo charges were so good, you didn't need to think, and we are a thinky sneaky army. Yeah, they were OP. And most of my opponents have wanted a rules check on them for me to prove that this was the actual power. But demo charges are still powerful. In the Host of Ascension, you have sustained hits from the detachment rule as long as you come from reserves and ignore cover. And with the Tunnel Crawler stratagem, you can deploy a unit just outside of 6 inches instead of outside of 9 inches. Still in range for the grenade stratagem and the demo charge's 8-inch throwing range. Add a Primus for +1 to hit, or a Benefictus to give lethal hits, and Assassination Edict, which against enemy character units will give you +1 to hit. And this unit has the Acolyte special rule of full rerolls to wound against enemies on objectives. Full rerolls to wound, ignore cover, sustained hits. That is a lot. That is nasty. The explosion train is not over. It keeps on going. Choo-choo! Choo-choo! But you cannot rely on demo charges alone. It's really only a Host of Ascension tactic, but you could also try it after jumping out of a Goliath Truck. A better use for the unit is popping up with their small footprint into the enemy deployment zone and completing secondary missions. Or you can go for fire. You always reroll wound rolls of 1, whether the enemy is an objective or not. That's why jumping out of a truck can work. You get to fully reroll the wound rolls if the truck shoots at the same unit. Then it doesn't matter if the enemy unit is on an objective or not. Or continue to pop up with Deep Strike and focus on the enemy units. 5 Acolytes with hand flamers can pop up and burn enemies off their home objective as we reroll wound rolls. Units like 5 Battle Sisters, 10 Chaos Cultists, 10 Gretchen with a Runt Herder, and 4 Sisters of Silence die quite reliably. You don't use demo charges for that because they're not in range from a normal 9-inch Deep Strike. So unless you're in the Host of Ascension, demo charges are not really taken. A unit of 5 with 5 hand flamers, or a unit of 5 with 4 hand flamers and a cult icon, that is the best. The cult icon is valuable for regeneration, the hand flamer is valuable for doing damage. If I didn't actually need the cult icon and I needed another hand flamer, I went into battle with the icon. If I need the icon in a game, I didn't take it for that. It's eternal pain. I think it's more valuable to have the cult icon. The Acolytes are objective control 2 per model, so even 1 icon left alive can get you back to objective control 8 on that objective, as you always bring back 3 models on an objective. The ability to reroll wounds also works in combat, so you can charge enemies on objectives. The claws are naturally -1 AP. These 5 Acolytes don't need support from characters. Their job is to pop up and complete secondary missions, take empty objectives, and destroy light infantry. They therefore work best as a unit of 5 to take up less space when deep striking, when they are destroyed, They are great to use resurgence points on to return to the game and continue completing missions or holding empty objectives while the enemy army continues to be depleted through attritional warfare. Instead of a unit of 10, try 2 units of 5. They can separate as secondary missions dictate, and they can double team an enemy unit. You have 2 units, each with a cult icon, and it is hard for enemies to shoot just enough to wipe out each unit without risking the icon staying alive to regenerate. And in combat, it's especially hard for enemies to put all of their models' attacks against one Acolyte unit to guarantee their destruction. This is a good unit in all detachments and army lists for completing missions. If you want to cause damage with it, with the demo charges, you want to have the Host of Ascension. Neophytes are our last battle line unit, and like the Acolytes, they can be a unit that scores victory points or a unit that kills the enemy, denying them the chance to score victory points. Our unit gets a plan generations in the making. We call it sticky objectives. So there's no need to choose Cadians from the Imperial Guard in your Brood Brothers army, which is extra sucky if you bought the kill team and didn't build them as characters and went for the Cadian unit. These are box-locked. You can't have 2 seismic cannons per 10 neophytes anymore, as only 1 seismic cannon comes in the box. The seismic cannons are down from 6 shots, 4 plus 2 from rapid fire, to 4 shots, including the rapid fire shots, and the mining lasers are reduced to strength 10 instead of strength 12 compared to their index version. They are not the short-range las cannons they once were. You want a mining laser and a seismic cannon. I also like the heavy stubber instead of the mining laser, but only in the Host of Ascension, where I can get sustained hits and also lethal hits from a Benefactus or a chink in their armor enhancement. The more shots you have, the more lethal hits you can get. It's your preference of grenade launcher, flame roll, Weber. You can have 2 per 10, and like the big weapons, you can't have 2 of the same per squad of 10. The grenade launcher can hurt light vehicles, but more likely heavy infantry. The Flamer and Weber get around the Neophyte's very average hit rolls, so they're a good pair in detachments other than the Host of Ascension, as auto-hitting weapons can't trigger critical hit abilities like sustained hits or lethal hits. If you don't roll a hit roll, you can't roll a 6. The Neophyte leader can have a chainsword or a power weapon, and an anointed pistol. That is, like any pistol on the sprue, which adds to their existing auto pistol. They don't give away their auto pistol, so you can fire 2 pistols from that model, or you can stick to a hybrid firearm, which is also fine. 1 model in the unit wants that cult icon. The cult icon still brings all the boys to the yard, but does so in the command phase, not the reinforcement step of the movement phase as it did in the index. This is good, because you get to have more bodies before you might have to take a battle shock test from being below half strength. Well, now we're not below half strength, so we don't have to take the battle shock test. And it lets you have more objective control to score those primary missions on the objectives in your command phase. If you take the objective, it is your objective as long as the enemy doesn't control it. Do you see how that can all snowball together? More bodies, so it's our objective, and we can leave. You can take the objectives in the middle and keep pushing towards the enemy, and they will stay as your objectives. It's a shame that the Neophytes lost their ability to generate command points, but at least that isn't lost from the army. 5 Acolytes farming or mining, it depends on your cult flavor, for command points can work. But the Neophytes make great damage dealers. They're just some dudes with regular weapons, and yet they're so good. Or they can be just a pain. They get the detachment stratagem bonuses in the Xenocrate congregation. They can advance and shoot. They can surge move into enemies to stop the enemies shooting you more. A tide of objective control 2 bodies can pop up and surround the enemy with downtrodden rise. That's recently reworked. It's 2 command points and it happens in your opponent's turn, so it may not be worth it if you set them up to get shot and charged, but if you can block an enemy charge or touch an objective to score in your coming turn, it is worth it. And using 20 Neophytes and the Vengeance of the Martyr to get full rerolls to hit if you don't have a Primus, because the Primus died and now you're avenging them. The Host of Ascension is where the shooting Neophytes work. Have a squad of 20, the detachment rule that gives you sustained hits and ignore cover, a Nexos with a chink in their armor which gives the unit lethal hits when they come from reserves, and because of the Nexos's ability, stratagems can be 1 command point fewer. Primed and Readied is a stratagem, so that they trigger those lethal hits and sustained hits on a 5+, and that Ridgerunner crossfire for an extra point of armor penetration. It is messy. It's not as good as when the Primus gave us full rerolls to hit, but it's still a lot of damage. And the Host of Ascension has the Return to the Shadow stratagem to do it again. It's not all about killing. The Neophytes have a role in charging enemies that can't kill them and holding them back, while the cult specialists complete the mission. If you have 20 cultists charge, and the enemy has, in their best profile, enough attacks to kill 18 of them, you will survive that combat. That's an enemy unit that has to fall back, or wait until their fight phase to get rid of the Neophytes. And that's assuming all of their attacks hit and wounded. If even one survives, Cult Icon brings back more. Expect to have Neophytes in any and every detachment. Units of 20 in the Host of Ascension, with the chink in their armor enhancement, or with a Benefactus. In the Brood Brothers detachment and the Xenocreed, you can have them in big or small squads, and you'll also have units of 10 in every detachment to spread out, deny enemy deep strike, prevent enemies from charging your more valuable units, and holding your objectives. 10 bodies is still difficult to get through without the enemy committing a dedicated infantry killing unit to them, because if they don't get through all 10, the icon brings back 3 models, guaranteed, and an extra D3 when on objectives. It is much harder to get through 20 Neophytes that recover models, especially with an Icon Ward that gives the unit a 5+ Feel No Pain, and in the Brood Brothers Auxilia, the Hero Returns enhancement lets all of your Neophytes be Objective Control 3. If you have a lot of Neophyte units, painting them in different colours can help to differentiate units, like a fan of the channel has done. There's a Discord linked in the description if you want to join and talk about Genestealer Cults with Genestealer Cult players. But with that many colours, you will end up dipping the paintbrush in your tea. I know what the entire Citadel paint range tastes like. I know that Mephiston Red tastes best. Okay, we're done with the battle line units. Let's move on to the other units. Starting with the Metamorphs, another unit you can make from the Acolyte box. They have improved since the Index, where they were a difficult unit with not great abilities and poor point cost compared to Advance and Charge Purestrains or Throw Bombs until the enemy leaves you alone Acolytes. I will be taking Metamorphs now. I tried to get them to work in the Index and they sort of had a role in holding a central objective. If they get shot, hope to return by Cult Ambush before the enemy can move on to the objective. If they get charged, hope you could fight on death. Those roles are gone. Metamorphs are good now. Comparing them to Acolytes in the Codex, you have lower objective control and no mining tools, but you can have hand flamers like the hand flamer Acolytes, and you have loads of attacks in combat with the versatile profile to go after 1 wound infantry or 2 wound infantry, and with strength 5, we can hurt toughness 9 vehicles with a decent wound roll. The models have a 5+ Feel No Pain, and that cult icon makes them harder to shift than Acolytes, and if an enemy unit on an objective has been killed, it doesn't matter about your objective control as long as it is at least 1. The Metamorphs love a Biophagus in any detachment. They get lethal hits on their melee attacks, but especially good in the Biosanctic Brood Surge. Because they have a Biophagus, they now get the detachment rule, which gives them an extra attack to either or both combat profiles, and you get +1 to charge rolls. The infiltration enhancement is good with them as they have Scout to move forward or hide as you scout after knowing who has the first turn. So you can go towards the enemy ready to attack them, or you can hide from the enemy so you don't get shot. In the Xenocreed congregation, they like Frenzied Devotion to have more attacks at weapon skill 2+, and their Feel No Pain can let them survive any hazardous blowback. Scout and Deep Strike are not compatible rules, you're going to be using one or the other, but they're versatile with both. And I suppose if your unit was on the table and scouted, then was destroyed, then a copy of that unit came back to return by Deep Strike, then you have used both abilities. Except the unit is considered a totally separate unit when you bring them back through Cult Ambush. I covered the Metamorphs when they first came out in the Codex version because they were so interesting and changed. Their special rule is that you can surge move, so if the enemy shoots you and kills at least 1 Metamorph, then you can move D6 inches. This can let you end in engagement range. You haven't charged, but as it is not your turn, you will usually be able to pick your Metamorphs to fight before the enemy unit that you just surged into. Their special rule has been corrected since the Codex, so it now says if no model in this unit has a hand flamer, rather than specifying that every model had to have an autopistol, which meant no cult icon and no characters. other than characters that carried an autopistol, like the Primus wouldn't be able to, but the Nexus could. That was fixed. If you have at least one hand flamer, you're still surging D6 inches. If you have no hand flamers, so you have an icon, you have characters, you have only autopistols, your surge move is always 6 inches. You can only surge move once per phase, but if you're far enough onto an objective, you can surge move into enemies that are on the other side. When the unit is coming from reserves and is going to charge, autopistols are fine, because you may not want to fire hand flamers for fear of making your impending charge harder. If you wanted a unit to arrive and shoot hand flamers, we have hand flamer acolytes for that. Pick the right cultist for the right job. Either all autopistols is fine or all hand flamers is fine. Go for all of one over the other. Because I either want to charge after deep striking or want to have a guaranteed 6-inch surge move to stop my opponent from trying it, and then, maybe they shoot me and I don't surge far enough into them. I don't want to take that risk. I'll have autopistols. As I have low toughness and save on the Metamorphs, I also like to charge from outside of line of sight, which is allowed, in which case, if I had hand flamers, I wasn't going to be using them. Once you are on an objective with Metamorphs, the enemy can't move on to the objective to try and take it without either a really good shooting unit that can wipe out the Metamorphs entirely before they can surge, or a good combat unit that will charge you to take the objective from you in the fight phase. This is where having a Locus for fight first removes one of those options from the enemy. Instead, they may have to move on to the objective with enough objective control to outscore us, but then the Metamorphs are not being hurt. We are free to move and shoot and charge as we like in the next turn. So I have autopistols, unless those Metamorphs were in a Goliath Truck. Then the Goliath Truck can scout, as it is a dedicated transport, our only dedicated transport, not our only transport. And then when they disembark with their hand flamers, they can have full rerolls to wound if they shoot at the same enemy unit the truck shot at and hit. Now we are like hand flamer acolytes. So the hand flamers are good for more shots, Overwatch, torrent weapons auto hit, so it makes for a very good lots of shots Overwatch, and a potential 6-inch surge, which enemies will want to stay like 7 inches away from. But unlike the hand flamer acolytes, Metamorph should always have a cult icon. Metamorphs are versatile, Metamorphs are good. I recommend you take Metamorphs, and I think they work in every detachment. Let's take a look at the Biosanctic specialists. Starting with the Aberrants, who are very much toned down from the index. Their 4+ feel no pain is now a 5+ feel no pain. They lost all of their weapon options. The road sign is cosmetic, and it doesn't matter if you have hammers or picks, they are the same. You know that tail attack on the unit champion that you always forgot to do? It doesn't matter anymore because it's gone. The hammers or weapons that they had have been toned way back compared to the index. I liked smashing Custodes with these hammers, but now these aberrant weapons are strength 7, meaning you don't wound marines on a 2+, and the weapons are down to damage 2, not damage 3. The mining tool acolytes have the damage 3 weapons. Aberrants took the biggest hit when the Codex was launched, and it was repeated hits. I still want lower points for their unit. I like them as hulking elites, little mini monsters that could smash Terminators. They now feel more on the Metamorph level, and I prefer Metamorphs. The unit's ability gives them -1 to be wounded, but that is only if you have a character in the unit, and it's only if the strength is higher, so strength 7 or more, then the -1 to be wounded kicks in. Okay, melter guns will be wounding them on a 4+, but it doesn't do anything against most other attacks. So what are we doing with the Aberrants? Are we using these muscle-bound idiots? Okay, muscular mutants of indeterminate intelligence. What can Abby do? Aberrant. This unit works best, and some would say only works well, in the Biosanctic Broodsearch. The Aberrants could be in a transport, a Rockgrinder, or a truck. More likely the Rockgrinder, because I suggest having smaller units of 5 rather than bigger, more expensive units of 10. And save the truck's ability, which is about rerolling wounds for shooting units. For shooting units. Only have units with guns inside a truck. Otherwise, use the Rockgrinder. Unless it's a points thing. The truck is much cheaper than the Rockgrinder. But you'll want a unit of Aberrants infiltrating with the Predatory Instincts enhancement, or either an Abominant or a Biophagus in the Biosanctic Broodsearch. This is the scary tactic we can continue from the index. First turn, charge and smash, or be hard to kill with multiple wounds, high toughness, and feel no pain. When you go in with Purestrain Genestealer support that can remove enemy screens, like units that are in the way of the thing you want to smash with Aberrants, then the Aberrants work rather well. You can deep strike and hurt things if you make the charge. In the Host of Ascension, there is the Our Time is Nigh enhancement for one of your characters. That gives you +2 to the charge roll. It doesn't have to be from reserve, but use it from reserve. Or use Stimulated Biosurge in the Biosanctic Brute Surge for at least another +1 to charge. Charge 2 things. Now you get +2 to the charge. And the detachment rule always gives them another +1 to the charge. This unit is still very tough. You can sit on an objective, but that really isn't ideal. There are cheaper units that have cult icons that are hard to kill. But with their toughness, you can tie up enemies that can't hurt them very well. However, as the Aberrants have no ranged attacks and are expensive to bring back even at the reduced 4 resurgence points that they are at time of recording, they won't work well in any list or style. 5 Aberrants is the same-ish costs as 10 Acolytes who have the damage 3 mining tools. For a squad of 10 Aberrants, at currently 300 points, I want 20 Metamorphs instead, who also have damage 2 attacks. The Aberrants really need a character to work, and then they're more of a delivery vessel for an Abominant, who then gets the Biosanctic Brute Surge bonuses, as otherwise they're not Aberrant keyword. Biosanctic Brute Surge needs you to have a Biophagus in the unit, or for the unit to be Purestrain Genestealers or Aberrants. Then characters within those units, like the Patriarch, like the Abominant, can get the bonuses. The Aberrants can hit things, but their main job now seems to be escorting someone with an even bigger hammer to hit things even harder. The Abominant no longer gives sustained hits. If you want more attacks, then you have to be in the Biosanctic Brute Surge and charge, as long as the Abominant is leading a unit of Aberrants. The Abominant is not Aberrant keyword. Or you can risk sustained hits from the detachment rule of the Host of Ascension, which you only get after arriving from reserves, or you can use the Inhuman Integration enhancement in Final Day. And the +1 to hit from the Final Day, as long as you're attacking an enemy within 6 inches of a Tyranid unit, that's very useful for Abominants and Aberrants. The Abominant special rule gives the Aberrants Fight on Death. That's the Index Metamorph's Fight on Death, but a worse version. It activates on a 4+ instead of a 3+. But it's okay to fight on death with the Abominant, which only happens if you're leading a unit, and then on a 2+, the Abominant will get back up at the end of the phase. So an Abominant is hard to keep down. Compared to the Index, the Abominant's own Feel No Pain is pulled back to the same level as the Aberrants, a 5+ instead of a 4+. So I wish you the best in rolling that 2+ to come back, and you come back with all of your wounds. Most importantly, the upsides. Since the Index, we've gained an attack. Yay! That is what I like to see. While others may look to the Benefactor's potential 2 shots at Strength 12, we have 4 Strength 12 attacks every time. So smash things. For that power, you can run the Abominant alone as a distraction. Pop up alone in the enemy deployment zone. It is hard for them to screen out one model. Complete missions. And or smash things. In the Host of Ascension, you have Our Time is Nigh, which allows you to charge on a 7+ from reserves. It doesn't have to be from reserves, but you use this enhancement once per game. If you're with Aberrants, you can have the Stimulated Biosurge, then you can have a charge on a 6+ or a 5+, depending on how many enemy units you want to charge. Rather than relying on a good charge roll with bonuses, use the stratagem Rapid Ingress, and then charge elite infantry like Meganobs or tanks. Instead of Our Time is Nigh, the Host of Ascension could give you +1 to hit with the Assassination Edict, and Big Hammer Lady is great with Epic Challenge to pulverize characters. We call her Big Hammer Lady on this channel. Either you see her as a farm girl with dungarees, or enjoy my conversion who has a boob tube. A funny alternative is the Xenocreed Congregation. The first time the Abominant goes down, it counts as destroyed. You have to be destroyed for the ability to trigger, which also allows you to activate the Vengeance for the Martyr stratagem to give Acolyte, Neophyte, and Metamorph units reroll hit rolls of 1 against the offending enemy unit for the rest of the game. So you can get revenge for the Abominant even though the Abominant is shouting from the back, "I'm alright! Guys, I'm fine! It was just a flesh wound!" If you're in the Biosanctic Brute Surge, Because it triggers on death, you can use Saintly Paroxysm to cause 2d3 mortal wounds. You were destroyed. How saintly, how wonderful. Applause all round, and then the Abominant is set back up on the table outside engagement range and says, haha, wanna see me do it again? If the Abominant is brought down again, Saintly Paroxysm again. That's wonderful for bringing down enemy units with good invulnerable saves, and enemies with high toughness and strong armor saves. The Abominant can function without the Aberrants, while the Aberrants want a character leading them, usually an Abominant. The Biosanctum Broodsurge continues to be popular. Seeing that Aberrants are not amazing, in my opinion, does it really dampen your desire to play the Biosanctum Broodsurge? Does it make it worse? Not even for me. I was always planning on running it with lots of Purestrain Genestealers to put the Genestealer in Genestealer Cult. All of our infantry can deep strike, so we need to decide if we deploy the unit on the table or have it in deep strike to arrive later. The units will need space to deep strike. Fast-moving enemies or hordes of enemies can really mess you up as they take up space and block deep strike within 9 inches. So you have to get in there, hold up the enemy, and then you will have space in no man's land to land. This is a tactic I recommend. There's a video breaking it down in much more detail, but it's called Genestealer Jail. And if you spell it with the medieval G, if you spell it G-A-O-L, then it's alliterative. Purestrain Prison. Genestealers can do this in any detachment, and in the Biosanctum Broodsurge with enhancement, Aberrants and any unit that can be joined by a Biophagus could also infiltrate. You can also do it with Jackal Bikers, who can scout really close to the enemy, and then move quickly. You don't have to charge with the Purestrains, you just need to infiltrate the Genestealers, move in front of the enemy units, no charging, and unless the enemy can fly, they cannot go past you in the movement phase, and they spend the shooting phase and the combat phase getting rid of the unit. As long as your Genestealers are about 6 inches from an objective marker, even enemies that surround them cannot consolidate onto the objective. The enemy lost a turn, and we can bring our Genestealers back if you spend the appropriate amount of resurgence points. The board is now open for our turn 2 where we can deep strike and complete secondary missions with them. We lost nothing. This is what it means to play the Genestealer Cult. Sacrificing cultists and Genestealers to slow down the enemy in order to score points. So the Purestrains. These are Genestealers that are unchanged from the index. They are perfect. They are pure strains. They have the advantage in all detachments that they can advance and charge without needing assistance from enhancements or stratagems. So if you want to return by cult ambush marker, they can get back into the fight immediately. You're going to be, 15 inches away from the enemy, 18 inches maybe. With their 8-inch move, D6 advance, and then charge, you've got a decent chance of succeeding at that charge. And they make for a great first turn charge if you did want to charge. Small units of 5 Purestrains can remove enemy screening units and be surprisingly hard to remove in turn with their 2 wounds and 5+ invulnerable save. If you clear enemy hordes and the utility units the enemy was going to use to score, they will have a much harder time getting victory points. Kill 10 Chaos Cultists, 10 Catachans, 10 Cadians, 5 Assault Intercessors, Kroot and Stealth Suits. Units that you can wipe out, or if you don't wipe them out, they can't really harm you. Reduce the enemy resources and their ability to take up space on the table that we want filled with deep striking units. If you don't kill them all and 1 out of 10 Orc Boys or 2 Assault Intercessor Space Marines survive, they can be finished later and they may fail a Battle Shock test to be unable to claim objectives, something the enemy cannot do to our equivalent units because Neophytes and Acolytes have cult icons and regenerate models. And units of 5 Purestrains can return by cult ambush to complete secondary missions. They are harder to kill than 5 Acolytes because of the invulnerable save and 2 wounds. So if you want an action completing and you're not going to shoot fire, I would pick Purestrains to come back before the Acolytes with Hand Flamers. Larger units of 10 Purestrains can tear up vulnerable enemies. Use the Primus to redeploy them in front of the enemy's weakest 1-wound units, often on a flank, and then in the first turn, charge and rip and tear. It's in the rules commentary that you can use redeploy abilities and still be able to infiltrate. If you want to attack enemies that have a better save than a 5+, the Patriarch gives them devastating wounds. Now you can attack tougher enemies, harder enemies. And we have ways and means to cause even more havoc. The Biosanctic Brood Surge detachment rule already gives them +1 to charge and an extra attack on the charge for 5 attacks per Purestrain. Use Gene Twisted Muscle so that tanks are wounded on a 5+, and that tide of AP -2 claw attacks can scratch through their armor to the inside where the tasty crew reside. In the Final Day detachment, use Hyper Ferocity for full rerolls to wound, which is great when combined with the Patriarch's devastating wounds. Now you can claw at much tougher targets. So let's talk about the Patriarch. The Patriarch is the top of the tier Tier 1 character. I'm not saying they're the best model on the table, but they are the leader of the pack. The Patriarch is not an epic hero, but you are still limited to 1. They are the Supreme Commander, so they have to be the Warlord, but you can take enhancements on them and level them up in Crusade games. If you had bonuses from last edition's Crusade, go ahead and slap them back on. The first enhancement to consider? Biomorph Adaptation for an extra armor penetration and extra damage on their devastating wound claws. Now they can very easily tear through Terminators and equivalents. You have the option of sustained hits or no Overwatch allowed in the Final Day. We know that they're great for giving the Purestrain Genestealers devastating wounds to tear into heavy infantry, but the Genestealers also help the Patriarch as they gain the Genestealer ability to advance and charge by being a model in the unit. Everyone always asks if they can fight first, as they're used to the high initiative of creatures from previous editions. They don't, unless under normal rules like charging. If you want to fight first, there is a once per game Crusade ability to give you that speedy monster feeling. If we're thinking of speed, the Goliath Truck no longer excludes the Patriarch. You can have a Patriarch in a Goliath Rockgrinder or Goliath Truck. It's any 12 infantry models, but most of the time you want the Patriarch to infiltrate. You can first turn charge, but be careful that the attack is worth it, as the Patriarch and Purestrains can die afterwards, and characters do not come back with Cult Ambush. Having them on a flank is usually best. The Patriarch's ability is a mini Shadow in the Warp. We are terrifying enemies nearby. All enemies within 6 inches have to take a battle shock test, and once per game, all enemies within an aura of 12 inches. Now this is in the fight phase, but you're not required to be in combat. Just within 6 inches of an enemy unit, so enemies not in combat will take a battle shock test. If you're not in combat but enemies are, they will still have to take a battle shock test if they're in range, and if they fail it, then enemies cannot use stratagems, they can't hold objectives. They can't take objectives if they fail their battle shock test. If this was done in the enemy fight phase, they are objective control 0, which means that you can just control an objective you were fighting over at the start of your turn. As this is happening in the fight phase, enemies cannot use Insane Bravery because it's not the command phase, and a mistake that commonly comes up, you cannot use Command Reroll on a battle shock test. Despite how much battle shock tests are derided or just said, blep, 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 doesn't really do anything, Cosmic Horror has helped me win games a few times. That is our top tier 1 character. The head of the cult is the Patriarch. The 3 characters that form the inner circle of the cult are the tier 2 characters. At least that's how I'm thinking of them for the purpose of this video. The 3 characters that get the 3+ feel no pain in the Xenocreed congregation. The first of the 3 is the Magus. They have an ability to remove battle shock from one of your units. Very useful. Well, quite useful. You can only use it at the start of a phase, and if the unit was battle shocked in the command phase, you're not going to be scoring victory points in the command phase because you can only undo the battle shock in the movement phase. But that will allow a unit to complete a secondary mission, whereas otherwise, if they're battle shocked, you can't do an action. The other Magus ability is Mind Control. It's 18-inch range, no line of sight needed, and if you roll the dice well, it's -1 to hit for the enemy unit, and if really lucky, -1 to wound for them instead of being unable to shoot, which was how the rule worked in the Index. The Magus gained a much-needed 5+ invulnerable save compared to the Index, but without the turn-off enemy shooting meme, there's not a lot here for a character that's meant to be one of the most important after the Patriarch. That was one thing I was able to find as a fun tactic we could do. Turn off an enemy tank about to fire 1,000,000 guns, or an Imperial Knight, or a buffed-up mega infantry squad. That option is gone. I didn't think Games Workshop could do it, but when the Codex came out, they somehow made the Magus worse. I'm particularly sad because I don't think I ever rolled a 6 for the index ability. I rolled plenty of 1s, but no 6s. Then as soon as we got the Codex, first time I used it, rolled a 6, -1 to wound. It would have been -1 to hit and -1 to wound, but it was against Deathwing Terminators and they ignore modifiers to hit rolls. The Magus is one of the cheapest characters, and they shouldn't be. They should be a psychic powerhouse blowing apart Terminators and leading the cult onwards. But we have so many characters, and they overlap in roles and use. The Benefactus is psychic damage, like the Magus, and gives lethal hits for shooting, but the Biophagus is lethal hits in combat. Other factions have characters that give a reroll to hit roll and also make stratagems cheaper. The Canoness with a Rod of Office as an example. We have that split over the Primus and the Nexus. And then the Primus changed to give +1 to hit instead of rerolls. We have 2 snipers, but one's on a bike. And there are 3 other characters beside the Jackal Alphus that could be called assassins. The Locus stabs people, the Sanctus stabs or shoots people, and the Kelermorph could gunsling shoot characters, but they lost precision. We have more characters than we need. Games Workshop, please eliminate 3. I don't dislike the Codex. I don't dislike the Genestealer Cult. I just dislike that there was no real improvement to the Magus. So we use them in the Xenocreed detachment to inconvenience enemy guns, and if the Magus dies, we can really avenge them as Acolytes, Neophytes, and Metamorphs that attack the enemy that killed them get to fully reroll their hit rolls. It feels like the I don't want to live anymore Ethereals from 6th edition. The Tau used to get a bonus if their Ethereal was killed, so they would jump from the highest building because there was fall damage in that edition. I think that is it for the Magus use. The Primus is the military commander of the Inner Circle, and this is one of our better characters in a sea of, yeah, if you want, kind of characters. Excellent for shenanigans of moving units into reserves that you always planned to. So you can tell your opponent, there are no units in reserves at the start of the game. This is true. You should also mention this ability, but then you move up to 3 of your units into reserves after deployment. You get to see more of their real deployment as you place 3 units onto the table that you're not really committing to the battle. So you deployed 3 units that aren't going to do anything, they're going to go into reserves, and the enemy deploys 3 units that are staying on the table. You have a lot more information about their deployment now. So you could deploy your units to go heavy on one flank and see if your opponent misplays their own deployment zone and leaves their other flank open for your Purestrains to rush in. You can redeploy infiltrating units. And if you have 10 Purestrains and the Patriarch strung out in the center, which stops enemy infiltrators going anywhere near, then redeploy the Purestrains before the game starts to be right in front of their perfect target. That's great. That's great. That is success for the Genestealer Cult. In the Host of Ascension, you can move lots of units into reserves as you can break the usual reserve limit using the Primus's ability. You could move your entire army into reserves. Or let's say almost your whole army into reserves. In the Host of Ascension, when units arrive from reserves, you get sustained hits and ignore cover. Use it. Redeployment with the Genestealer Cult can swing the game in our favor before it ever started. The Primus's other ability was to re-roll all hit rolls. This made the Primus a great leader for units of 20 Neophytes in most detachments and with the right enhancement. In the Host of Ascension, a chink in their armor for lethal hits, which triggers on a 5+ with primed and readied, and sustained hits from the detachment rule, also triggering on a 5+. In the Brood Brothers Auxilia, you could have +1 to hit from the detachment rule, reroll wound rolls of 1 from symbiotic destruction, and you're getting full rerolls to hit from the Primus. Or you were. With the Firepoint Commander enhancement, you could Overwatch on a 5+. With full rerolls to hit, this was almost like another round of shooting from 20 Neophytes. In Final Day, you can have sustained hits as an enhancement. That still works, but critical hits are triggered on unmodified dice rolls. So +1 to hit and you rolled a 5, that doesn't become a sustained hit. It was only when we could fully reroll the hit roll that you could get a new sustained hit. This is also why it's not working so well in the Host of Ascension with the lethal hits and the sustained hits. In the Xenocreed detachment, you're no longer taking the Denunciator of Tyrants enhancement. That's +1 to hit and wound versus characters. So you'd come from reserves and be able to strike at character units. Now that the Primus gives their unit +1 to hit and not full rerolls to hit, their usefulness in Neophytes goes way down. Any of those enhancements or detachment rules, like the Final Days Catalyst or Brood Brothers Integrated Tactics, can replicate the ability, and +1 to hit can't stack to give an overall result of +2 to hit. We still want the Primus to redeploy, but the unit I put them in is different. Like 20 Neophytes benefiting from the Denunciator of Tyrants in the Xenocreed congregation will benefit more from an Iconward with that enhancement. Then the unit has a 5+ Feel No Pain. Very, very tough to get through. 20 Neophytes in the Host of Ascension prefer a Nexos with a chink in their armor enhancement, who can then make the primed and readied stratagem cheaper. A Primus can still improve the hit rolls of a massive number of Neophyte shots, but now I like to add them to support the many attacks of a Metamorph squad, or make it more likely that the damage 3 attacks of the Acolyte mining tools will hit. The third and final character of the inner circle is the Iconward, the battle standard bearer of the Genestealer Cult. In the Codex compared to the Index, the Iconward gained Scout, with the intention, probably, of having them join Metamorphs. If every model in the unit can Scout, the whole unit can Scout. If you had a different character with Metamorphs, they can't Scout. And the Iconward also has an ability that boosts the Feel No Pain of the Metamorphs from 5+ to 4+. With Scout, you can speed across the table in a Goliath Truck. It's a dedicated transport, so it can Scout. If everything inside has Scout, so you Scout. And then it has a 12-inch move. Or you Scout and disembark, and in the Xenocreed congregation, with Incendiary Inspiration on the Iconward, or using the Tireless Fervor stratagem, you can disembark and advance and charge with rerolls on both rolls from the detachment rule. Or you can have the Iconward join Acolytes or Neophytes. Whatever unit you join, they will get a boost of about 1/3 to their survivability. But if you want Acolytes with a 5 Feel No Pain, play them as Metamorphs. They're from the same box, and for a few points more, you have a 5+ Feel No Pain. Or you can think of it the different way. Don't attach an Iconward to Metamorphs, because they have a 5+ Feel No Pain already. Now Acolytes can have mining tools with damage 3, and also have a 5+ Feel No Pain. Either way is okay. But for the most effect, add the Iconward to 20 Neophytes. I didn't recommend it in the Index when battle line units always came back, or they had a bonus to come back as a new unit, and it wasn't costing any kind of resource, as it is now costing resurgence points. But now, use Acolyte Iconwards with Neophytes. It's a great way to hold up the enemy. Get them onto an objective! Then they are a nightmare to shift when combined with returning 3+ D3 models in your turn. Objective Control 41 also keeps that objective under your control. Use the Hero Return enhancement in the Brood Brothers Auxilia for an enhanced Objective Control 3 per Neophyte and +1 leadership. But in any detachment, grab your Neophytes by the cult icon and get them to an objective. If you can, spread them over 2 objectives. You are overdoing it to control only one objective, which will allow your opponent to ignore it and focus their forces elsewhere. If they did, well, they fell into another Genestealer Cult trap. The Neophytes can use a plan generations in the making. The objective remains ours, and the tide moves to the next objective. Like, charge them. What are they going to do? Ineffectively fail to kill all of us? We will have more objective control than them. The other ability of the Iconward is to protect cult ambush markers that the enemy has destroyed. As we have gone through so many revisions to cult ambush, we don't need to protect the markers, as the units can return by strategic reserves from the board edge in our turn, or by deep strike in our turn. If you really wanted a unit to arrive from cult ambush in your opponent's turn, you can do it near to the Iconward. So those are the tier 2 inner circle characters, the ones that directly serve the Patriarch. The tier 3 characters are the characters I classify as being the ones that can double up with tier 2 characters in battle line units, Acolytes of either kind or the Neophytes. They can't double up with each other, they can't double up in any other kind of unit. You will see from their rules that they're allowed to join a unit even if a Primus, Iconward or Magus is already attached to that unit. The first of these is the Biophagus. They are much the same as the Index, but their Alchemist Familiar, the best familiar, gives them +1 to wound against infantry instead of giving them anti-infantry 2+ once per game. The Biophagus' own combat abilities already have that anti-infantry strike. In most cases, there's no real change compared to the Index ability. Metamorphs and Aberrants go from wounding on a 3+ to wounding on a 2+. But it has good use for Strength 5 Metamorphs and Acolytes with mining tools, also Strength 5. They can better hurt Gravis Marines and Meganobs or Orcs and Votan generally. There's only room for one mining-themed army in the galaxy. It's a shame it's limited to infantry, as something to take down vehicles would be nice. We generally lack anti-tank. Lethal hits can help. That's what the Biophagus gives their unit all the time. Oh no, just for combat. Just for melee attacks. But for Aberrants that have a good strength already, if there is a creature they struggle to hurt, having a lady with a big hammer will do more to remove the problem than the lethal hit scientist. Once per game, the Biophagus can have 3 more attacks on their model, on that model only, and the damage characteristic becomes D3 plus 3, but there's no armor penetration, so it's a funny day if it hurts something. That makes them surprisingly good to be the last attack that finishes a character unit, like taking out the Winged Warrior Prime or an Orc Warboss. In the Biosanctic Broodsurge, where they are one of the key characters to unlock the detachment rule and stratagems for units like Acolyte Hybrids or Metamorphs, then they get +1 to attack and +1 to the charge roll as long as the Biophagus is alive. That includes the Biophagus model. More attacks on that injector goad makes it more likely that everyone will have the funny story of that one time it did something. Use a Ridgerunner to get AP -1 to increase the chance of doing something, only if it's of value to the unit the Biophagus is leading. Funny memes aren't worth throwing away victory for. So the Biophagus is a Biosanctic Broodsurge character, but they also work well in the Xenocreed congregation, because they can give reroll advance rolls and charge rolls to Acolytes, Metaphors, or Neophytes. Any character that's leading one of those units gets to reroll advance and charge rolls. In the Host of Ascension, they're very good. You can have a unit come from Deep Strike, they will get the detachment rule, so that's sustained hits until the end of your turn, so it will work in combat. Now we have lethal hits and sustained hits. There's an enhancement to give you +2 to the charge called Our Time is Nigh, and then when in combat, use Primed and Readied, and you get sustained hits from the detachment rule and lethal hits from the Biophagus triggering on a 5+. Nice. Very good character, because they work in a lot of detachments. The abilities of the Nexos would theoretically also make them to be a good pick in a lot of detachments, but it depends which units they can join and which stratagems are then able to be made cheaper. There's not much benefit in the Outlander Claw, you would be stuck with using the core rulebook stratagems. In the Biosanctic Broodsurge, important stratagems are for Aberrants and Purestrains, which the Nexos can't join. And adding a Nexus to Acolytes or Metamorph stops the Biophagus also being attached, so they won't be able to benefit from the detachment rule, or any of the stratagems, that the Nexus would then make cheaper, but he can't because you can't have them stratagems. In the Xenocreed congregation, the Nexus has more use. It's a character in one of these units. You can reroll advance and charge rolls, but the Nexus doesn't want to be pushed towards the enemy as their unit advances and charges, even if that stratagem costs 0 command points. The Nexus only works if you have good stratagems, so you won't see them in the Brood Brothers Auxilia. The Host of Ascension is the most obvious to have the resources for tunnel crawlers and primed and readied, or using coordinated trap, but now it only costs a reasonable 1 command point instead of 2 command points. On the turn or turns you have lots of deep striking units attack, being able to have a pocket of free stratagems is great. And in the turn after the strike, that's the turn when we will return to the shadows. But it's free. What is this free stratagem ability? He lets you use any stratagem for 1 command point fewer, including going to 0 command points, as long as you can use it on that unit, his unit. It's a bit more like the index version on release instead of the codex. Any good stratagem, get them for free. If you were about to say, hang on, I've been out of this game a while, does that not only apply to battle tactic stratagems? No, that limitation from late 2023 has been removed and does not apply anymore. Though the Nexus' Codex version is slightly worse than the Index version, his previous Index version ability was once per turn, not once per battle round. And it's only once regardless of the number of Nexus. So you don't need more than 1. If you had more than 1, you also can't use the Cult Infiltration ability on the same Cult Ambush marker more than once. But the Nexus still lets you move blips around. This is not very useful of balance patches continually changing Cult Ambush meant that the loss of a Cult Ambush marker no longer removes the ambushing unit. They are in strategic reserves. Of a sort. But if you wanted to not need to use the detachments that have stratagems for playing the Cult Ambush token minigame, you can save command points by using the Nexus instead. I feel that the Nexus character is like a rear echelon Primus. That's okay. What would make them better is if they had swapped abilities. Like the Primus got the -1 command point stratagem ability so that the Nexos isn't dragged to the front lines, and the misdirection to redistribute troops and redeploy them looks like it should be done by the man at the back with the table. That would have been an improvement and made both the Primus feel more frontline and the Nexus feel more backline. Instead, we have this weird mix of both. So the Nexus is an okay unit if you have good stratagems and can safely place them in a unit to use those stratagems. The Clamavus. Can this one be quick? The new Truth's ability causes battle shock tests instead of the previous index version of making them harder for the enemy to pass. It's an 18-inch range, you don't need line of sight, and importantly, it triggers in your command phase. So you could potentially turn a contested objective to become yours and score it immediately if you're able to battle shock the enemy and you were also contesting the objective with another unit. Yeah, the ability's got better, it's not really effective. I still don't plan to run a Clamavus. Have you watched any Genestealer Cult video on my channel before? I don't like the battle DJ. I don't like the idea of trying to start a rave in the middle of a battlefield. We are stealthy. We don't want the oppressors to learn how powerful we are or how fast the cult is growing. Loud techno music dance parties are the opposite of that. If you face enemies that like to deep strike a lot, the Death Watch, the Grey Knights, Necron Hypercrypt Legion, Chaos Demons, then the Clamavus is more useful. But for a similar number of points, I prefer a unit of Neophytes who can spread out to cover a similar area of denial to the Clamavus. Even if you are bad at moving your Neophytes to take up space to keep the enemy units away, being bad over and over again will force you to get good. The Clamavus is spending about 50 points, depending on Munitorm Field Manual patches to points. You're spending points to not get better. You can improve. Don't carry a crutch if you don't need one. The Locus is another tier 3 character. Same as the Index, and still my crutch to not need to get better at making charges. They're still very good for fight first, and we are doing a lot more fighting. The Locus has a dual role in the lore as an assassin/bodyguard. I don't like the model, so I made my own. The Games Workshop model doesn't look like they're a bodyguard protecting someone, or like they're an assassin ready to strike. In fact, it doesn't even look like a Genestealer Cult model if it wasn't for the massive Genestealer Cult icon in their back. Call it stealthy. The Locus is useful in most detachments. Still useful in the Xenocreed congregation, despite not appearing in the detachment rule as one of the big 3 characters, because any character with Metamorphs, Acolytes, or Neophytes can re-roll advance and charge rolls. It's only in the Biosanctic Brood Surge I don't take them because I want a Biophagus in the unit, so the unit can use the detachment bonus, and you can't have both a Locus and a Biophagus in the same Acolyte unit. With lots of terrain on the table, our biggest weakness is combat. Some big dude with loads of attacks. What are you going to do against this guy? Die! That's what you're going to do. But if you have a Locus with your Acolytes, when this guy comes in, snip snip, I'm an Acolyte and I just cut you in half before your Marine attacks with what I'm assuming is something like 80 attacks per model at strength 5 or strength 4. Whatever detachment you're using, the Locus can use rapid ingress, and then a shooty enemy army can't attack you because I arrived out of line of sight, and it doesn't matter if fighty enemies charge you, we have fight first. And it's especially good to rapid ingress near to one of our units that is just about to be charged, so that we can heroically intervene with the Locus, and then we will still fight before the enemy. With one of the enhancements in the Brood Brothers Auxilia, that's free. You are in range of your own unit. The Locus is good for letting Acolytes or Metamorphs hold objectives, where charging is the way enemies will often get that objective. With 5 attacks at damage 2, and always fighting first, regardless of whether they're leading a unit or not, they're better than a Primus in combat, and 1 less strength than the Patriarch, though lacking devastating wounds and twin-linked. And the Locus is the cheapest character. They have a much less useful bodyguard rule. If attacks were going to be made on, like, the Primus that's in the same unit as them, the Primus gets to feel no pain. You don't reallocate attacks to the Locus. And the Locus doesn't give themselves a feel no pain of 4+, it's other character models that get the benefit. I've tried it a few times and I've increasingly found it is not worth adding 2 characters to the only combat unit the Locus can join that can have 2 characters included. The Acolyte unit. Neophytes are not a combat unit, and they don't want to fight first. And you can't have 2 characters in a Metamorph unit. I don't know who's told you before that you could do that. 10 Acolytes with 2 characters is expensive and dies just as quickly. If you really hate precision attacks that go against your Primus or Iconward, we have a counter in the Xenocrete congregation for the Magus, Primus, and Iconward to get a 3+ Feel No Pain. Those are all the Tier 3 characters. Tier 4 is looking at the lone characters. We have another assassin with a knife who can also have a sniper rifle. And the sort of assassin, the Kelermorph and the Reductus. It's a really diverse cast of characters here. In some way, they kill your enemies. How it is done is up to you. The Kelermorph is sadly the weakest performing of the 3. No infiltrating, no stealth. They've had a complete redesign compared to the Index, no longer popping up near Neophytes and providing limited return fire if the Neophytes were shot. The Kelermorph can fight, and is not just there to complete secondary missions. How much they fight is still quite limited. The pistols are strength 6 and AP -2, but there's no precision, no sustained hits, and they're still damage 1 attacks. They can remove small, lightly armored units, but so can any other Genestealer Cult unit. The enemies the Kelermorph shoots have to take a Battleshock test, and if they move within 9 inches of you, you shoot and Scarper, leaving the enemy with a Battleshock test to take. The difficulty of the rule is it's 9 inches to trigger that ability, and you need line of sight to shoot them, but enemies within 12 inches can shoot the Kelermorph to death. They can stay between 9 and 12 inches, and then nothing happens. I can't really say the Kelermorph has a best detachment or is a good choice, but if you're playing boarding actions, within the narrow confines of the corridors, the Kelermorph shooting and hiding around a corner out of line of sight of return fire works pretty well. So it's only within boarding actions I recommend using the Cowboy Gunslinger, unless you want a Cowboy Gunslinger in your army. Theme over substance is always a choice. The Reductus is not an assassin in the traditional sense, but she can bring the house down on top of her target and anyone else in the building. Did the target die? Assassination successful. Much better than a Kelermorph. She can infiltrate, she has lone operative, she has stealth, she has all the good abilities. With Infiltrate, that's fantastic for turn 1 actions and other secondary missions. She's gained a 5+ invulnerable save compared to the Index. That won't help her much, but occasionally it does, and the enemy has to come closer to within 9 inches of a planted explosive. Best thing to do is wait out of line of sight near to an objective. The enemy's going to go onto that objective, assuming you don't roll a 1, and that will set off her planted explosive. Being out of line of sight means the enemy can come within 12 inches, within the lone operative range, and still not be able to do anything to her. So they're probably going to move within 9 inches. Then if they were going to charge her, now they are likely to succeed the charge. And that sets off the bomb. This is different to the Kelermorph, whose ability to shoot is hindered by line of sight. Because we don't need line of sight to have the enemy step on a mine, it scares the enemies into not moving close to that one rock where she's hiding. Make the enemies think. You can win the game if you make the enemy overthink so much that they make a mistake and their brains just overheat and explode. Like scanners. The planted explosive doesn't trigger if the enemy disembarks within range, as that is not a normal move, nor is if they deep strike deployed within 6 inches using a stratagem. It has to be a normal move, advanced move, or fallback move. And then it's a lot of mortal wounds. Having a Reductus on an objective will be irritating for your opponent who won't want to go near, and that isn't only because of the proximity mines, but also free grenade stratagem, and a powerful demo charge that hits on a 3+. Compared to her Index version, she had her demo charges toned down by 3 shots to just D6 like the Acolytes and Strength 9 instead of the previous Strength 12 that saw her taking everywhere. But the Reductus is so good. She does so much and I'm still not through all of her weapons. The Reductus also has remote explosives. You can fire them, or technically detonate them, from out of line of sight. It's indirect fire. That's great for clearing small enemy units off the enemy home objective, like Gretchen, 10 Zangors, 6 Voidsmen at Arms. Units like these suffer against the indirect fire explosions. The Reductus Saboteur is a good choice in all detachments. Have her jump out of a truck in the Outlander Claw, demo charge and grenades flying. Do that alongside a Taurox of Imperial Guard in the Brood Brothers Auxilia, and she gets +1 to hit from the detachment rule. Demo charges hitting on a 2+. Have her infiltrate and be protected by other infiltrating units in the Biosanctic Brute Surge or in Final Day. That is a friendly lictor. Friendly. Yes. The Reductus is a great character. The Sanctus is cheaper than the Kelermorph and the Reductus. If you want a lone operative to stay on an objective and be untargetable, then the Sanctus is the one to choose. They infiltrate, and they're cheaper than other infiltrating units. If you just want to keep enemy infiltrators back away from you, you can put the Sanctus out, giving you more control over the middle of the board. There are 2 weapon options, and each comes with a different ability. Psychic Spore is there either way, which is changed from the index. It no longer causes devastating wounds against your chosen target or ignore cover, but you get to reroll hit rolls and wound rolls. So the anti-infantry knife got a bit of a penalty as they're not causing devastating wounds to infantry on a 3+. But their ability with the knife is that they can't be shot by Overwatch, so that's useful as you can pop out of hiding to charge the chosen Psychic Spore enemy infantry unit, like Tau Stealth Suits, Space Marine Scouts. You can also jump out and complete secondary missions without fear of Overwatch, of which any amount would kill them. Reroll to hit and wound are nice, and I like the sniper version always having the Prowling Adjutant kind of enhancement at a flat 6-inch move away. Also, that sniper is now strength 7, so light vehicles and monsters better watch out. So there are different abilities and weapons for knife version and sniper version, almost like they're separate units. Please, Games Workshop, don't make them separate units. We don't need more characters. Both versions work. I can't really pick one over the other. Their best use is an action and secondary mission completer, and secondly, as an assassin. For the Knife Sanctus, pick the closest enemy infantry unit as your Psychic Spore target. The sniper version should pick a Psyker unit or a unit with a character, ideally a 3-wound character for our damage 3 shot. With precision, you don't have to shoot the character. If you shoot a Terminator in a unit with a Terminator Librarian, you wound on a 2+, and that damage 3 will kill a Terminator. A Sanctus works in all the detachments, but there is no detachment where they truly excel. Then we have the final level, the Tier 5 characters and the other units. These are the characters that can't be joined by others to double up, and also don't act alone. They go in 2 separate units. This is where we have the Benefactus, the Jackal Alphus, and the Abominant. We've already covered the Abominant, so the next character is the Benefactus. The Benefactus is the new unit for 10th edition. A what-if Zoanthrope DNA got mixed in, but really has the mind gun that the Magus should have. We didn't need more characters. If this had been a unit of 3 and acted like a Psychic Choir in the way the Imperial Guard used to have in their codex, it would work. We could see the cue from the Zoanthropes, but I don't like it as a character. There's a las cannon brain shot that ignores cover. It can have twice as many shots, but gets hazardous. If failed, that will blow the lady up because she only has 3 wounds. And if she was in the middle of a unit and you are now out of coherency, that is a big problem for your unit. You can have a lone Benefactus in a Goliath Truck or Rockgrinder taking up a spare seat, then the hazardous weapon fired from the firing deck will not vaporize her if the hazardous test is failed. With firing deck, the truck counts as firing the weapon, so failed hazardous tests will hurt the truck instead. If you had them in a vehicle, when needed, the Benefactus can get out to complete missions and sit on uncontested objectives. The idea of 3 Benefactus, the maximum allowed in 2,000-point games, gets floated around every now and then, but it's very expensive, close to like 300 points, and if the truck is destroyed, the individuals inside are very easy to pick off. Acting alone, you don't get the lethal hits on ranged attacks ability. Only when leading the unit do you get lethal hits on ranged attacks. If you want lethal hits in melee, you need a Biophagus. Lethal hits on ranged attacks is useful in the Host of Ascension when you arrive from reserves with Neophytes, and the detachment rule gives you ignore cover and sustained hits, and now you get lethal hits with your sustained hits, and that can trigger on a 5+ with the primed and readied stratagem. You could have the Benefactus with demolition charged Acolytes. It's pointless on the hand flamers because they auto hit, so you don't roll a hit roll, so you can't get lethal hits. But with lethal hits on the bombs, and if you fail any hazardous tests, they can be passed on to the bombers. That is how the current rule works. And that is anyone equipped with a hazardous weapon in the unit, even if they have thrown their once per game demolition charge. The profile doesn't go away, even if they can only be fired once. So you'll mainly take the Benefactus in the Host of Ascension. Because in the Brood Brothers Auxilia, instead of having a 2-shot brain las cannon, you could take some real las cannons. Their other ability to boost the invulnerable save of just that model from a 5+ to a 4+ feels like an error. Surely it should give the unit the invulnerable save to match the Imperial Guard Psyker, and the psychic protection. And it isn't like the Sisters Canoness that can have it boosted once per game to a 2+ for one phase. Just one phase, once per game, for that one model to change their 5+ invulnerable save to a 4+ invulnerable save. If you forgot this ability existed, it won't impact your game at all. The Jackal Alphus save is changed from the index. It's now a 5+ armor save instead of just a 5. How did it take a year to get that changed? I've tried using the Jackal Alphus alone to speed around and complete secondary missions, but it rarely works. They have stealth to be slightly harder to hit, but no lone operative. Not getting hit at all is better. Because of their speed, they can get good angles to shoot at enemies, but they haven't got very good follow-up damage. The Sanctus Sniper is a better sniper rifle. But in the Host of Ascension, or the Brood Brothers Auxilia, or the Final Day detachment, you can tag an enemy so that other units get to reroll hit rolls of 1 against them. That's more stacked bonuses with the Ridgerunner and the detachment rules. And after you've fired your shot, you can move 6 inches to get out of line of sight if there's suitable cover nearby. But you're still very vulnerable to indirect fire weapons. In the Outlander Claw, if you had them alone, you wouldn't get the Sticky Objectives ability. It's only Atalan Jackals, it's not all mounted units, so the Alphas doesn't get that to hold objectives unless they were part of a Jackal Biker squad. However, they do get the mounted bonus of +1 objective control. With Jackal Bikers, you can get close to use a demolition run, and then shoot and then move backwards or forwards again to move block the enemy with your bikes. A Kira slide to pivot sideways and be in the way. But the Alphus is very much an optional character for the bikes. Instead of a lone Alphus, if you have enough points, I would take another squad of Jackal Bikers instead. The remaining units are all specialists in the Outlander Claw. That doesn't mean you should only use them in the Outlander Claw detachment, just that is where they get the most rule support. In the Outlander Claw, you can scout with a lot of these units. And then you don't need Purestrain Genestealers to infiltrate. But you could infiltrate some Purestrain Genestealers as well. Scouting is done after you know who goes first, so you can move your scouts either forward or to the side so they're out of line of sight. And infiltrating units or scouting units can hold up the enemy in the first turn to stop them getting beyond the middle of the board. Some enemies can move really, really quickly, although if enemies can fly, you're not going to be able to block them with bikes or Purestrains. Jackal Bikers scout, and this is a big scout move of 9 inches that can let you start on the objectives in the center of the board, as they're often 10 inches away with a 3-inch area of control. You can get inside of that to control it, and then in your command phase, your first turn command phase, at the end of that phase, you can use the Outlander Claw Rapid Takeover rule. It is now your objective, until the enemy has at least 1 objective control at the end of any phase to take it off you. If you're going first, move forward with your 12-inch move and block enemies from easily retaking the objective. Even if they charge and kill your bikes, you have the objective in the coming turn to score it. If you were going second, hide or block the movement of the enemy if they move fast or have infiltrators. The Outlander Claw is their best detachment, and they work in other detachments, but at a similar points cost are Purestrain Genestealers, so it'll be mostly down to personal preference if you want guns and scout, or claws and infiltration. Atalan Jackal Bikers have stealth, 2 wounds, 4 wounds on the quad bike, and toughness 4, so they're no easy target to take down. Compared to their initial index version, they have gone down a little bit in power. Their demolition run is once per battle round, not every time they complete a normal move. And in the Codex it is written that it is Jackal models only. It doesn't apply to the Alphas if they have joined the unit. But it is a powerful ability. Roll a dice for every model in the unit, only 1 model has to be in range of the chosen enemy, and for every 4+, that is a mortal wound. It is to a maximum of 6 mortal wounds, so units of 5 are advised, otherwise a unit of 10 will hit the cap, compared to 2 squads of 5, each of which can cause up to 5 mortal wounds. And that is an amazing ability for so many other reasons. Unlike grenades, you can use it against enemies in engagement range of other units. You can advance and use the demo run unit rule. All the enemy needs to be is visible. Or you could combo it with the grenade stratagem and maybe throw in a lucky mining laser from a wolf quad and you can bring down tough enemies that are far more points than the bikers. Another reason to have units of 5 is resurgence points. At time of recording, 2 squads of 5 are cheaper to bring back than 1 squad of 10. When we bring them back, Compared to the earlier index versions where we had to be within 6 inches of a board edge to deploy, now it is 9 inches, so a unit of 10 models can fit on the edge and around a cult ambush marker. Also at time of recording, cult ambush is strategic reserves that you can't rapid ingress out of, so the ambush marker is only used if returning in the enemy turn. As I understand it, there is no FAQ. Or it may be that whether coming out of cult ambush as if it was strategic reserves, or out of cult ambush the other way using the cult ambush markers, either way they have to be near the cult ambush marker, but I'm assuming that phrases like, if this cannot be done, the unit cannot be set up, is leftover wording from when we could only return via cult ambush. And the reason you have to have them near the board edge to use the cult ambush marker is to compensate for not having deep strike. So either on your turn you arrive by strategic reserves, or in your opponent's turn by the cult ambush marker. Then you have to arrive near the edge of the board. If you arrive back in your turn, it is 6 inches from the edge as per strategic reserves, but 9 inches from the edge using the cult ambush markers, which can put you onto objectives on the side, as long as there's no enemy units within 9 inches, of course. Oops, that's mine now. Especially in the Outlander Claw, where you can use sticky objectives on it in your next command phase. So it's an extra good idea to return in the enemy turn with cult ambush. With that in mind, whenever you have a unit enter cult ambush, but you plan to return them to the battlefield using deep strike, put their cult ambush marker near the edge of the board for future Jackal units to use. Cult ambush tokens are not tied to one particular unit, and they're not removed when you place the unit onto the table using deep strike. So if you lost an Acolyte unit and a Jackal Biker unit, that's 2 cult ambush markers. You could put one on the left flank, one on the right flank, and when you deep strike the Acolytes, you still have the 2 cult ambush markers. It's up to you which one you use on the Jackal Bikers. There are weapon options for the Bikers, but there's usually just one best way to take them. You can have 2 power weapons per unit of 5. On the sprues, there's an axe, a crowbar, a hammer. It's up to you which of those are power weapons. You can also have a grenade launcher, and that could be on a model with a power weapon, but depicting them holding 2 weapons and driving with no hands looks off, especially as the handlebar is attached to one of the hands. But you could represent the power weapon with one of the weapons sticking out of one of the packs that's strapped to the bikes. The Wolf Court has the choice of a heavy stubber, an incinerator, or a mining laser. This mining laser has not been reduced in power at all, unlike the ones the Neophytes have, so that one, the Strength 12 mining laser. That seems like a fair thing to have on a civilian bike. But thinking of civilian vehicles, the Goliath Truck. The civilian workhorse of the Imperium. Depending on the planet, these could be coal-powered or electric or, let's be honest, they have a hybrid engine. The truck... Oh my. The truck is firing deck 6 now. So use the best Neophyte weapons, the grenade launchers, the flamers, the seismic cannon, the mining laser, and characters like the Benefactus' laser brain, or remote explosives or a Reductus. You can't use one-shot weapons like the Acolyte demo charges from inside. That's no longer compatible with the firing deck. But they have their own demolition charge cache. It has blast, so we can't use it in conjunction with big guns never tire. If the enemy had charged us, we can't just throw grenades at their feet because that is next to our wheels. But it's quite useful to have, and the demolition cache doesn't run out. We're toughness 9, so we're decent at tank shock. If you tank shock, that's roughly 3 mortal wounds, similar to what a grenade could cause. But the main reasons to take the truck are to transport people. It's a dedicated transport, so you have to transport something. You can carry a Patriarch, as can the Rockgrinder, but infiltrating, then advancing and charging will serve them just fine unless you're really, really worried about them getting shot. Well, I'm sorry, but on the tabletop at least, everyone is a disposable asset in the Genestealer Cult Codex. If you don't like that for the lore, don't include the Patriarch. Keep him at home. One tactic I found is rather useful is to have like a Reductus Saboteur inside at the start of the game. If you have no one inside a dedicated transport before the game starts, it explodes. So having at least a Reductus Saboteur inside stops that. And then there's 10 Neophytes that will use their planned generations in the making to control the home objective forever. Then they jump into the truck before it moves off. Don't be afraid to have units go in and out of the truck. Then we have the bunker truck tactic. The truck doesn't have to move. One unit gets out and shoots and/or charges, another unit gets in. When they in turn get out, they can benefit from the truck's fire support ability and reroll wound rolls. All you have to do with the Goliath Truck is hit with one of the weapons. And you can fire the heavy stubber at one target and the twin autocannon at another target. Those rerolls are good for Metamorphs with hand flamers or neophytes really wanting to have a go. And with their speed, and with scouting from Metamorphs, you can have the truck go really far up the board. Speed can be our friend, but you don't have to. Just because you can, advance and charge with everything, doesn't mean you should. Trucks are relatively easy to take down. But in the Outlander Claw, there's a stratagem that causes enemy attacks to be -1 damage until the end of the phase, and from the detachment rule you get bonus objective control, so you could leave that truck on an objective as a proper bunker, and the enemy will have to destroy it or rush in with lots of troops. The Rockgrinder is the other transport. Like the Goliath Truck, it has toned down demo charges compared to its index version, and there has been a change to the Drill Dozer Blade. We get 2 more attacks compared to the index, but no sustained hits. Overall, it's a positive, and you can regain those sustained hits through the Host of Ascension detachment rule. When you come on from strategic reserves, because it's any kind of reserves, not just deep strike, until the end of the turn, you will have sustained hits. You just need to make that charge. Or you could rapid ingress, because the Host of Ascension rule lasts from when you arrive until the end of your next fight phase. So if you turn up in the enemy turn, you have the enemy's fight phase, your next movement phase, shooting phase, and fight phase. We don't have the grinding clearance bonus attacks anymore. And although Tank Shock has changed from using strength to use toughness compared to the start of the edition, it's still 10 dice for us. That's an average of 3, maybe 4 mortal wounds. Instead of impact hits, grinding clearance now makes falling back units take a desperate escape test and at -1 to the test if they're battle shocked. It's a shame it doesn't work on tanks and monsters, as a failed desperate escape test kills the model regardless of the number of wounds remaining. But the Drill Dozer Blade itself is still pretty good. We have a choice of 3 range weapons to go with our heavy stubber and our demolition charge cache, a heavy mining laser, a heavy seismic cannon, or a clearance incinerator. I encourage the heavy mining laser. While other mining lasers were toned down, the heavy mining laser was not. This is one of our few anti-tank weapons, and it also works against heavy infantry because it has blast. But the Achilles Ridgerunner has the same weapon and is cheaper, so don't take the Rockgrinder for the gun. Think of what else it can do, or choose another weapon to complement its role of driving forward with some troops inside and crushing things. It's good to have the clearance incinerator for some Overwatch. 2d6 shots at strength 6 and AP -1. Ignore cover, of course, because it's fire. But I'd prefer the heavy mining laser. It isn't the toughest tank, so don't get gung-ho with it. Keep it hidden until you have a good shot and charge ready. This is an armoured truck more than a tank. Its favourite attachment is understandably the Outlander Claw to be objective control 4 and be able to disappear off the board and return elsewhere if you need to get somewhere else and crush something else. You can take objectives and enemies can't fall back from it without taking a desperate escape test, and you may then be able to out-objective control small enemy units that choose not to fall back. It's a good drill, nice gun, I wish it was not as expensive. And it has a small transport capacity. There's no bonuses to shooting units, so the best units to pick are 5 Aberrants and an Abominant in the Bioscientific Brood Surge to keep up with their fellow infiltrating Aberrants and Purestrain Genestealers. They arrive late to the party, but they're driven in a party bus. It's not a dedicated transport, so having Metamorphs inside won't make it scout, but unlike dedicated transports, you don't have to put a unit inside before the game begins. It can run empty until needed. There is another drill unit, the Tectonic Fragdrill, which is unchanged. And it's still a more expensive version of an Iconward, where you can protect the blips. Cult ambush markers flock to it, though the Iconward is once per game and the drill is every time. Wow. For the purpose of clarity to people using subtitles or who struggle to recognize tone, that wow was sarcastic. The distinction is irrelevant for the points difference. Don't take the frag drill, use it as the pretty terrain piece it is. Somehow, the Ridgerunner got even better compared to the index and now supports combat units as well as shooting. Look at that crossfire first in its index form. Until the end of the phase, Unit that targets the same enemy unit as affected by crossfire get an extra point of armor penetration on their guns. Now in its Codex form, it lasts until the end of the turn, so it is viable for Genestealer Cult combat attacks. Up the armor penetration of Acolytes and Metamorphs to -2 on their claws. Hand Flamers are -1 AP. It's a great counter for Armor of Contempt. Maybe you used your demo charge in the shooting phase, now you can charge in those Acolytes and their claws are twice as penetrative. Both parts of the Acolytes are supported. The Achilles Ridgerunner is perhaps the most important Genestealer Cult support unit. I don't want to go into battle without one, or without two. Crossfire has to be done in the shooting phase, so it won't help you if you use it in Overwatch in the enemy's movement phase or charge phase. That won't affect the coming enemy's fight phase. But any ranged weapon on the Ridgerunner can trigger crossfire. Heavy stubbers can do it, while the heavy mining laser shoots a different target. The mortar can apply it indirectly. Then the Ridgerunner can stay on a home objective and hand out crossfire bonuses where you need it, like the other side of the board where your Genestealers are getting into the enemy backline. You have a big gun, and you can complete secondary missions if need be, and it has the speed to get around and do that. It supports our troops, it slays our foes, it scores us points. It is mayhap the best unit in the Codex. And there are 3 extra upgrades for it. You pick one. The Flare Launcher lets you use Smokescreen for free. The Survey Auger removes cover. That's not needed if you're supporting very combat-heavy armies like Biosanctic Broodsurge or lots of Acolytes with Hand Flamers who already have Ignore Cover on their Flamers, but I would still take it in the Host of Ascension. Yes, the Host of Ascension detachment rule gives units Ignore Cover when coming from reserve, but if it is the turn after 20 Neophytes have landed and shot, they really benefit from having an extra point of armor penetration on their autoguns, shotguns, flamers, and all the shots from the heavy stubbers, and they don't want that to disappear again from the enemy unit getting the benefit of cover. Or you can have a spotter that improves your ballistic skill, and you can use that with benefits like the detachment rule of the final day or the Brood Brothers Auxilia to get another +1 to hit, so you can hit on a 2+ with a massive mining laser. The 2 do stack, as the spotter changes the ballistic skill profile, and the other is +1 to the dice roll. The limit is you can't modify the dice roll by more than +1. If you're still looking for the cult limo, and you've seen all the units we have, and it doesn't feel like a good Genestealer Cult Codex, just know that Warlord Games sells a flying cult limo called the Grav Car. It harks back to an older version of the cult, where they may not win, but at least they would go into battle in style. Strap a cannon to the roof and you have a Ridgerunner. I have affiliate links for Warlord Games in the description, as well as other companies in many countries from which you can get your Genestealer Cult models cheaper than going through Games Workshop. It helps out your supportive local cult Magus in the process. That is all of the units in the Genestealer Cult Codex, plus the Tectonic Fragdrill in the faction pack. The tactics for the Genestealer Cult are changed from the index. We no longer cause massive damage and respawn to do it again. We can still do a lot of damage in one go, but it is not as repeatable across the army as it was in the index. And our unit stats and raw power have been reduced. That hurt the demo charge Acolytes and the Aberrants. The tactics for all detachments have become more about blocking the enemy, sacrificing some units to delay the enemy, while other units score primary and secondary victory points. That is Genestealer Jail, and that does match the playstyle of a civilian-based insurgent that keeps pulling in troops from hidden areas. You do have units and combos that cause damage. Final Day Purestrains in the Patriarch rerolling wounds, and the Host of Ascension Neophyte Hordes, for example. But one turn later, they may be thrown in to slow down an enemy unit they have little chance of killing. Xenos Creed throws waves of units at the enemy to hold them back. Biosanctic Broodsurge uses Genestealers and infiltrating Aberrants to hold them up. In the Outlander Claw, the bikes scout and get up close where their big bases stop the enemy moving through, but maybe the enemy flies over, but to where? If Neophytes have used Deep Strike to get to the middle of the board and spread out to prevent their movement, they're not landing there. The Brood Brothers Auxilia can play a little differently, and it uses big tanks to crush the enemy, but scouting jungle fighters in a Taurox or Chimera can also block the foe. We still have good units, we still have a lot of tricks, and we will find more tricksy tactics. That is what this channel does, and is why you should subscribe. Army list to the next part. Putting all you've learned together into a working army list. I have a service available through Ko-fi where you can talk to me one-on-one, and I will make you an army list with the units tailored to you as an individual. I have spaces available for this every month. Or if you prefer to drop some tip money through that Ko-fi link instead, that is perfectly acceptable. My darlings and viewers, have a great day until Ascension Day.